So welcome to Going Green. This is podcast number 6, looking at future food.
Yummy.
We're going to have a look at basically alternatives to basically what I would call meat and 2 veg.
Well, yeah, but it's not really alternatives. It's more what's a better way of producing food? Because obviously the human population is growing. You know, it's going to reach a whopping apparently 9 billion. Sorry, not 9,000. 9 billion in the next 30 years, which is a ridiculous number. And how big are we? We're what, 7? No, 6.5 isn't it?
Something like that, yeah. And we've only got finite resources, and that's the big problem. So we've got to try and find a way of transforming our, well, not just English food system, but a whole global food system.
Exactly. And it's one of those things where we need to work out a way to feed these extra, but also to feed ourselves in a sustainable, in a renewable, in a way that we can actually feed ourselves without, crashing the planet. But that's the wrong way to put it. But we would like to continue surviving, but it is working on, how would we feed ourselves in the next 30 to 40 years?
Well, globally, we eat just a small range of foods. I'm thinking not just necessarily me, but everyone on the planet really doesn't eat that variety. The figures are 75% of the global food supply comes from just 12 plants. And these plants would include things like rice and maize and wheat, which are in fact 60% of all the calories that come into the human diet.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
And we eat just really 5 species of animals.
Yeah, I'll go with that. What's that? That beef, pork, chicken, turkey, and lamb.
Probably more or less that, yeah. There might be a particular fish in there, but there's an awful lot of food out there that we don't eat. And the problem comes that if I offer you something like a locust to eat,
I'm going to go, ugh.
Yeah, you just don't like the idea of what's going on. There are other staggering figures, like since 1900, 75% of the genetic plant diversity in agriculture has actually been lost.
Yeah, well, it's like the case of sort of every banana you eat, of course, is actually not a new banana, but a clone of, one species of banana? Or one?
Yeah. And if something happens to bananas, it's going to take out not just one banana, but all bananas throughout the whole world. We don't eat terribly we eat some things like cabbages and peas and tomatoes and then lots of the fruit. But it's still not an awful lot. And this idea of having what's called monoculture farming, just one sort of food, it means that we've got a problem that if something happens to it. And when I was a lot younger, we used to talk about crop rotation, how they grew something in one field and then they did some sort of plant, and then another one, then a different one, and then they let it go fallow for the 4th year. Kept it going, but now with intensive farming, we've got to use chemicals, or there are organic chemicals, but it's still putting chemicals on there to try and keep things going. So I think the idea is we've got to try and diversify our diets, which would possibly improve human health. It's going to benefit the environment. And that is the basic important bit that we've actually got to try and do. And the suggestions are insects. And we've seen your face when we suggested insects. And it doesn't have to be just insects. We can go for arachnids if you like.
Well, yeah, but the major thing is there are 2 ways to eat an insect, of course. There is to eat the actual insect, whole, fried, grilled, you name it, or is basically to cook it and then grind it into protein powder.
To process it in some ways, yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where, you might not look at thinking of eating a locust. However, if it's protein powder, then are you going to really notice the fact it's an insect?
Yeah, probably not. The other one is algae. We've got a lot of algae that I could sell you quite a amount out of my pond. We've got lots of algae which produce and grow at a phenomenal rate. And there's the famous soya. So there are sort of alternatives we could think of it. But let's ask the first question then. Why do we really need different foods?
Well, the main concern we are having is, of course, as you said, it is the fact that currently the monoculture of foods or growing foods is that we are putting more and more resources into growing food to feed the ever-growing population. And eventually we're going to hit where there is now more land or more for food, growing for use for food, than for other things. You think of sort of things like, how much the Amazon rainforest has been, deforested for cattle, or even for soya. It's this ever growing sort of need to feed people. It gets to a point where, is it a good idea that we eat as much as we do?
Well, there's the old story about World War II when the British people were under rationing, and the argument is that they've never been so healthy. And I took a ration book into school, and I told the kids, this is the ration, and they were listening, and they were saying, that's not too bad. I can survive on that. And I then said, yeah, but that's for a week. They thought it was for a day, and they couldn't work out how they were going to survive on that amount.
Yeah, it's one of those hard things to say, is that we've got too much calorie content, which is the biggest problem, you see.
Yeah. So let's look at, though, some of the figures, because people bandy these figures around and they're not always quite what they seem. So let's grow some grass. So I've got a field. I'm going to grow some grass, and on that grass, I'm going to shove some cattle, and the cattle are going to eat. But unfortunately, the cattle need to do other things. They need to respire. So that's no help, and they got to keep warm, and they got to wander around, and they're going to.
And you're doing this for, I don't know, 6-8 years?
Oh, no, you can actually get cattle a lot quicker than that. So we're doing that, but about optimally, you can get about 10% of the energy in grass converted into beef.
Yeah, it's about right.
So 90% of the grass, the whatever you're growing, is actually gone into wastage. But that's not so true, is it?
Well, this is the argument that lots of people have, is that the cow respires and it gives up, but then it poops out as manure, which goes back, which feeds basically is all the waste that goes back in. So technically, it's processed as much as it can, and anything that it doesn't process goes back into the system. Effectively, it's neutral.
Yeah. But let's suppose I want to make some feed for my cattle. So what I do is, perhaps, let's say I grow some wheat. Now I can take the grain out, which I can use to make some bread for you. But the rest of the stuff we can actually turn into feed for the cattle. So that's not going quite so much to waste.
Yeah, all the bran. Exactly. This is where, how the efficiency of, say, cattle growing, but it's not necessarily cattle grown, but it's in agriculture.
Well, it can be cattle, it can be pigs,
Yeah.
it can be sheep, goats, all
whatever.
sorts.
Yeah, but the efficiency of sort of going is, you know, where is things going? Where are the resources going? You see, you know, think, you know, you're only taking the wheat out, but the rest of it, the bran of the wheat, you know, where's that going? You throw it away. So suddenly your wheat farmer sells the wheat for flour and then sells the bran to the livestock industry.
Yeah.
So he's now got two sources of income.
Yeah. And they actually grow grass and various other things to make silage.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Is used. Yeah.
So suddenly you can see that, you know, yes, when you're growing for people, you've only got one. But if you're clever, you can maximize growing, so you can get the most economic worth out of your food. It's like, you know, you take corn. Corn is exactly the same. You know, it's what, 80% plant / husk, and we only eat the corn, the cob, on the seeds really, but you know, from it. So then you're sort of going, well, you know, how much of that is useful? Well,
yeah,
exactly.
But if we can actually take a step back from that and say, right, let's not just go for maize, for white rice, but you can then get some other food supply, then you can actually make the food supply more resilient. And that is sort of really quite useful. According to World Health Organization and World Wildlife Fund and a few others, basically there are about 50 foods they suggest that we should eat. Well, we can eat as well as we should eat, and that would increase the biodiversity of the world, and we need those really to just try and keep us going and sort of make things a little bit better. So let's start with algae.
Come back to algae, shall we?
Yeah. It's a good place to start. Algae, they're nutrient rich.
I mean, they are used as vegetarian jelly, as I hear.
Yeah, well, they make in theory, about half of all the oxygen on the Earth. So,
Yeah.
you know, they're pretty good. And they've got a lot of protein in them. And so if you can sort of process it in a little way, then you may be able to sort of make it a sort of a replacement for meat. It might sound a little bit better. There's an awful lot, although if you don't like the algae, let's go next door and we can have seaweed.
Well, I mean, you eat seaweed for your sushi. It's always quite it's one of those things where it's almost like well, kale's a seaweed, but it's almost like lettuce in regards to,
Yeah.
you know, it's all right. It doesn't have, but the problem is, of course, doing that is also not the minerals, but the nutrients involved. Because unfortunately, the algae, it's very basic. You know, it doesn't have that much, but you know, so it's the very, you know, it doesn't honestly contain that much.
Well,
so effectively, you need to make it, you know, like how you make white rice brown. You need to make, you know, fortify algae.
Yeah. Well, you can do that. Sometimes laver seaweed is actually used in Wales to make laver bread, which is a fresh seaweed, slow cooked, seasoned sort of, and it's traditionally served with hot buttered toast. And basically that's been going around since, well, the Vikings. But it's not the only one. I know a lot of seaweed's actually eaten in Korea and Japan.
Yeah, with all the sushi.
Yeah. But I suppose there's also a lot of, you know, round in France, New Zealand, Argentina, and
what can you say?
It's pretty good. Well, the fish like it, and they seem to eat it quite happily. Right, other foods then. How about things like beans and pulses, as they're called?
Well, that's the good old plant-based meat stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. And they're very good because a lot of those actually fix the nitrogen. So they've got these little bacteria in them that fix nitrogen in the little rhizomes. And basically they're environmental superheroes. They're fixing all this nitrogen, offering us a rich source of fiber, which is not useful to you actually. Protein, lots of the B vitamins. And these beans and pulses are basically what vegetarian and vegan people sort of eat.
Well, live by, really.
Yeah. Well, I've had a student who was very vegan, sort of not. She was vegan, but she was actually very pro being vegan. And I was trying to explain to her that if I went onto a vegan diet, I'd be dead within a few weeks. Simply because I don't tend to like much of the sort of beans and pulses and various things.
I mean, yeah, it's an acquired taste, but it's one of the ways. It's it's something we have to look forward to. But one of the critical things they try to do with all these things is to turn the bean, the corn bush, and actually make it taste
a little different.
Yeah. They could either try to make it taste of meat, or they could just make it not taste of bean.
Yeah. Well, we've got the idea of perhaps having sort of these things, beans and pulses, gives us lentils, of course. And lentils, according to the data, it's 43 times less carbon footprint than eating beef.
Well, there you go.
Except I don't like lentils.
Well, I think you need to get going.
Yeah. Well, soybeans or soya is great. It's high in protein. It's been cultivated for the last 9,000 years. And you can do quite a lot with this. Soybean production, I've seen them sort of spin it into a steak.
Yeah,
and
well, I mean,
I've tasted it, and it certainly tastes like, well, I don't remember it beef or anything like tasting quite like that.
This is where, well, you can either use soy or you can turn it into tofu. You see, that's the next one.
Yeah. I've tried tofu, and because basically the audience here could be sort of a gentle persuasion, I can't actually give you words to describe what I felt when I ate tofu.
What's wrong with tofu? Tofu's like...
I was trying to find something actually right about it.
Well, effectively, it's bean cheese, instead of dairy cheese. But
no, I don't agree there.
Well, you make it in every way you make cheese.
Yeah.
It's just bean cheese.
Yeah, and you can keep it, thank you, yeah. How about cacti? How do you fancy cacti?
Well, as long as it's not aloe vera, I'm fine.
Yeah. So, there are some edible cacti, and I know that in Mexican cuisine, some parts are actually used in that.
Well, yeah. It's one of those things where, it's all right. But as I said, it's critically sort of, what are you getting from it or getting out of it? Is it sort of the seaweed of sort of, you're just using the outer layer, or are you using more, say, the guts of the cactus to actually make more of a slime? Or, not
slime, thank you, yeah.
Well, it's a succulent,
Yeah.
Well, I know it's not quite, but it's more sort of, it's that almost fine, it's like gelatine, not gelatin. It's gelatin that they use in
Yes. Yeah, but that's generally from animals.
Well, I know it's from animals, but I'm just saying
you can get it from plant. Yeah,
you can, but that's I think where the stuff comes from.
So we can also go for something like some cereals and grains. We're all trying to persuade to sort of eat these, which are generally made at the moment from rice, maize, and wheat, but they don't have to be. One of the ones that I've come across is buckwheat. And of course, if you say to someone, oh, you're going to eat buckwheat instead of wheat, they're quite happy because, of course, buckwheat is wheat, isn't it? And it's not.
Well, no,
It's not actually related to the plant at all. And it can be used in things like salads and stuffing. Popular in Russia, I understand, where they put it in goulash.
Whoa. Although you can throw anything in really goulash, so I'm not really putting it out there.
Yeah. And there are the millets. I know I had a budgie, and he used to love millet. And I did, as a little kid, try some, and I couldn't see why the budgie liked it at all.
Well, yeah, but that's where, we are not designed to eat the cereals as well as other things. So, we've been, I wouldn't say, we've been evolved to eat,
Yeah.
rather than the cereals. But we've got a little bit because, of course, you just look at our teeth. We've got basically the three types of tooth in there.
You are an omnivore.
Omnivore, straight back and forth. So, all right. How about what is known as, like say, fake meat, but that's the wrong way to put it, but lab-grown meat. This is, basically protein paste, as in, meat paste, as in meat, proteins derived from, grown into a, I say a slab, but it's more like
well, one of my favourites is Marmite. That stuff that's sort of very sort of polar, you either love it or you hate it. And that's just recycled from the breweries.
Yeah, that's the tub.
That's yeast.
Yes, but I'm more talking about actual sort of
growing it.
Growing a paddy, that's the wrong way to put it, but sort of, there is no animal ever touched this meat.
Yeah.
And it's getting there, They're trying to grow currently fish food at the minute. Or lab-grown fish food.
This is the other alternative, isn't it? You either eat the veg yourself, or you can put it into an animal that grows reasonably quickly, which is where we started with the insects, because they do grow very quickly.
Yeah, it's just one of those.
See, I don't mind fruit. I'm not a great one for veg, but I don't mind the sort of fruit, eating some of those. I'm not so keen, though, on my leafy greens. The sort of, I don't mind it as a salad, but I can't say that I'm
well, this is where, of course, you don't like the beans. This is, you don't eat all the things that give you all the protein, the nutrients, all those things, like the beans, like I would say the seaweed.
But I'll go for things like red cabbage. I'll go for spinach leaves. I grow my own watercress, which is sort of
the water blight. Sorry, not watercress. That's how much.
Yeah. We do grow an awful lot of stuff. It's sort of it's where we live in Hertfordshire. It's obviously the water is right for growing watercress, which we grow like a weed here. We can't eat enough.
Yeah, I know.
How about things like mushrooms?
Well, that's a bit of a dull point.
One of your favourite mushrooms, aren't they?
Well, they're not really. It's one of those things where, the smell is the not appealing things. It's like, do you want to eat the things that eat you? Like
yeah.
Because mushrooms, of course, you look at the food chain and sort of, mushrooms are really low. But, of course, as being fungi, they eat the remains of things.
And they're very good at doing that.
Very good at doing that. So it's sort of like, they're converting nutrients that way. And they're all right to eat, I suppose. But, it's just one of the things where I personally don't like the smell. It's the smell more rather than the taste. Because, obviously, what is a mushroom? You're a fungi. It's just protein mass. It's a different plant.
Yet truffles are some of the most prized foods.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. As I said, it's it is this sort of this glorified protein mush.
Yeah.
So what else can you take with it?
Well, we can start with some nuts and some seeds. Some of these are some of my favourites. the idea how one peanut can give you enough sort of energy to sort of keep going for an enormous
Wasn't it
distance.
daft? They said like a spoonful of peanut butter. So obviously, unfortunately, this is processed peanuts. But there it is. Was it like 1 tablespoon of peanut butter is like most of your calories for that day?
Yeah.
It's something ridiculous or something like that.
It is frightening, yeah. And it doesn't have to be peanuts, but there are lots of other seeds that I discovered that I quite like them. But some of them aren't quite what you imagine. Like we could go for flax seeds. I thought we used flax to make material.
Makes flax to make string. But,
yeah, hemp seeds. But hemp is also the stuff that you can make rope with. Sesame seeds. Of course, they go on sesame seed buns.
Yeah.
And walnuts, of course. They're really quite good fun.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of nuts, but
Yeah.
they're all right.
I'm just trying to go through a few things. How about the root vegetables? Some of these I don't mind. I'm quite happy. You can have things like parsley. I know you have a bit of parsley, but how about eating parsley roots?
I've never had one personally.
And
Nor could I get one in the supermarket.
no, we got some in the garden you can sort of have. And it's sort of basically a little bit like a carrot, really.
Right.
And then you can have, obviously, most of the salad foods. There is one food here that is one that I know that puts horror into the thoughts of many people, and that's sprouts.
Oh, yes, the delicacy of, which is known as, of the Christmas dinner, which is known as Brussels sprouts, yes.
Yeah, we had a friend called Hilda, who's passed away, sadly, and she couldn't manage Christmas dinner without
had these Brussels sprouts. Oh, I know. It was a terrible problem we were having. But yes.
And most of us couldn't stand the smell, let alone anything else.
Yeah, well, they just glorify. It's just a different variety of cabbage, you see. So, it's just one of those things.
But in the same sort of basic family, you've got chickpeas.
Yes, which is quite a common thing to eat. This is where, it's a whole... You come back to pulses, we're quite good at sort of what is, what do we eat compared to, and what do we know that we eat,
Well, there are the roots, the tubers, my staple, which is potatoes. You like also sweet potatoes.
They've got the sweet,
but we've got other things like
you've got your parsnips.
Yes, you've got your purple yams.
Oh, yams.
Yam bean root. So there are quite a few sort of other foods that you can have a go at. But I have to say that we're going to have to stop there. We've come up on our time. We're trying to keep it down to 30 minutes. So if you get desperate, you can go and pop in and see your local vegetarian butcher. I call them a greengrocer.
Well, yeah, I know.
We had a long argument about this.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah. So thank you for listening. You've been listening to Going Green, our weekly podcast on what you can do about climate and what you can do for your little bit. So I'll say goodbye from me, Philip, and...
Apparently I meant to say, and goodbye to you. No, got it wrong. Right, cut.
And it's goodbye from him.
That's it.
Right, bye-bye.
Bye.